Imagine your entire community is just turned upside down overnight. The buildings you know are gone, the rules have completely vanished, and everyone is frantically looking for a lifeline. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really incredible, deeply moving study on disaster survival and human resilience. We're going to look at what actually happens when the unthinkable strikes and who steps up to guide a community through its darkest times.
To really wrap our heads around the gravity of this, we have to look at the absolutely staggering reality of the February 2023 Turkey earthquakes. We are talking about two massive consecutive quakes, hitting magnitudes of 7.7 and 7.6. The scale of this disaster was just terrifying. Over 50,000 people lost their lives, hundreds of thousands were displaced, and literally entire cities were leveled in an instant.
So that brings us to a super striking question, which is the whole focus of our explainer today. When the ground finally stops shaking and the dust settles, who actually holds the community together? You might immediately think of emergency responders, politicians, or maybe the military. But as this research reveals, the unexpected first responders at the absolute center of recovery are actually school principals.
Okay, let's dive right into this. The core crisis, a research gap.
To really appreciate what these school leaders pulled off, we first need to understand the core problem this article is trying to solve. Researchers call it a research gap, basically a big blank spot in our understanding of crisis management. Look, over the last few years, we've learned a ton about managing health crises, right? There are countless studies out there on how principals led during the COVID-19 pandemic. But navigating a lockdown? That is vastly different from navigating a natural disaster. We severely lack data on how local educational leaders manage sudden, catastrophic physical destruction where human lives are immediately at risk and basic needs like food and shelter just vanish overnight.
To fill that gap, the researchers went in and interviewed 15 school principals from the hardest hit regions who actually managed to successfully guide their communities through the aftermath. And what they found is nothing short of inspiring. We can break their actions down into three main findings, completely skipping all the academic jargon. Number 1, meeting immediate needs. Number 2, providing deep emotional support. And number 3, keeping education alive against all odds. Let's look at each of these closely.
All right, finding number 1, meeting immediate needs.
In the hours and days right after the quakes, being a principal wasn't about managing a curriculum anymore. Suddenly, these leaders had to find shelter, source food, and distribute clothing for their communities. Their schools, if they were even still standing, transformed instantly into safe havens. Just take a look at this quote from a middle school principal in the study. "I took the initiative to open the school's facilities for the benefit of the people without waiting for any directive." That perfectly captures the exact moment the traditional role of a principal just shifted. People were gathering in schoolyards in a total state of panic. These leaders didn't wait around for a memo from the government. They acted on instinct and a profound moral responsibility to shelter victims. And this reveals a really crucial clash. Strict regulations versus flexible crisis leadership. Under normal circumstances, a school is bound by rigid rules. But in a crisis, true leadership requires rule bending. You absolutely cannot let bureaucracy stand in the way of saving lives. These principals had to take the rule book and essentially throw it out the window. They were doing things that would be totally unimaginable in normal times. For instance, they disabled the school bells because the loud sound was actually causing panic attacks. They granted immediate undocumented leave to their traumatized teachers. One principal even described how, with the local ambulances completely overwhelmed, he used his own personal car as a makeshift ambulance. He rushed a sick parent to the hospital, waited with them, and brought them back. It was all about raw, urgent survival.
Which brings us to finding number 2, emotional support.
Survival is just the first step. Once immediate physical safety was secured, these leaders face the deep collective psychological trauma experienced by their students, their teachers, and the parents. And this brilliantly illustrates the real heart of their work. A high school principal recounted organizing activities to kind of lift this heavy veil of grief. They said, "I remember the smiles of the students during the puppet show, providing temporary relief from their pain." Just imagine that contrast for a second. Utter devastation all around you, and yet a principal is out there organizing a puppet show just to give kids a momentary escape. In the research paper, they call this organizing social and motivational activities. But in simple, everyday terms, it just meant bringing music, animations, and games back into these children's lives. It was a highly targeted effort to restore a sense of hope and protect their mental well-being. The principals knew, for a fact, that healing the emotional wounds was every bit as critical as rebuilding the physical walls. And it wasn't just organized events either. The most profound support was incredibly personal. Principals were physically walking through tent cities just to listen to the concerns of parents. They were sitting down with terrified teachers to figure out a plan forward. They were literally comforting grieving students who had lost family members. So why does this matter? Because it shows us that in any crisis, anywhere in the world, the human element of empathy and active listening is the absolute bedrock of recovery.
And that leads right into finding number 3, continuing education.
Once the community was sheltered and emotionally supported, the focus violently shifted back to the core mission, but, with a totally new purpose. Listen to the incredible emotional resonance of this quote from a middle school principal. Education was the strongest sign that life was continuing, and we worked together with all our might to give this sign. Education wasn't just about passing tests anymore. It was the ultimate symbol of defiance against the destruction. It meant order was returning amidst all this chaos. But getting back to learning? Total logistical nightmare. Understandably, many teachers had fled the region with their families. So how did they fix it? Pure ingenuity. Principals started creatively swapping teachers between different schools. If one school had a math teacher but no science teacher, and the neighboring school had the reverse, they just shared them. They also physically dragged desks outside, building temporary classrooms right in the schoolyards with the help of parents. They used every single tool at their disposal. They set up rotational teaching to maximize their limited staff. They organized supplementary courses to help kids catch up on missed lessons before the national exams. And when traumatized students stopped showing up, they didn't just mark them absent and move on. No, they went out, held meetings with those students and their families, and gently brought them back into the fold. They literally shared the load to keep these kids learning.
Let's pull back and look at the big picture here. Lessons for the future.
You might be wondering, why does an explainer about an earthquake in Turkey matter to you no matter where you live? Well, because these leaders inadvertently created a masterclass roadmap for recovering from almost any disaster. Look at this timeline. It always starts with the initial shock, where leadership is 100% about basic needs and rapid, flexible decisions. Then it moves to normalization, where the priorities shift entirely to emotional support and empathy. Finally, you reach rebuilding, where routine and future-focused activities like continuing education cement the recovery. This exact framework applies whether you're facing a massive earthquake, a devastating flood, or a destructive hurricane.
The ultimate takeaways from this study are incredibly clear. First, crises are increasing globally, from climate events to natural disasters, so we absolutely have to be prepared. Second, effective leadership isn't about following some rigid manual. It requires immense flexibility and the courage to take initiative. And third, above all else, empathy is what actually builds community resilience. So, I want to leave you with this somewhat provocative thought. Think about your own neighborhood, your local schools, your community leaders. If a crisis hit your town tomorrow, is your community ready? Do your local leaders have the flexibility and the empathy to guide you through the darkness? It is definitely something we all need to be thinking about. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible research. If you found this explainer as fascinating and inspiring as I did, please go ahead and hit that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss our future deep dives into the studies that explain our world. I'll catch you in the next one.